Driving alone at night is something most of us have done, but not everyone realizes just how unsettling those lonely country roads can be. With no lights, no witnesses, and only the sound of your own car for company, you're truly vulnerable to the unknown. Tonight, I'll be sharing 3 true horror stories from desolate back roads. Stories of strange figures, chilling encounters, and unexplained events that will make you think twice before traveling alone in the dark. I was driving home late one evening after visiting my parents. They live out in the countryside, and to get back to my place, I have to cut through a stretch of road that runs for miles without any real towns or even gas stations. It's the kind of road where, once you're on it, you feel like you're completely alone in the world. No lights, no people, just woods on both sides, and the occasional glimpse of farmland. It was late fall, around 11:30 at night. The air was cold and damp, and a thin layer of mist clung to the ground like it didn't want to leave. I had the heat on low in my car, and the radio turned down because I like hearing the hum of the tires on the pavement when I drive at night. At first, it was peaceful, just me, the road, and the sound of my car. But then, about 20 minutes into the drive, I noticed something strange. Up ahead, just barely caught in my headlights, I saw what looked like movement at the edge of the trees. At first, I thought it was a deer. Pretty common out there. So I slowed down, but as I got closer, I realized it wasn't a deer at all. It was a person. They were standing right at the tree line, facing the road, not moving. Just standing there. My high beams hit them fully when I got close enough, and I could finally make out details. It was a man, or at least I think it was a man, wearing what looked like old, ragged clothing. His posture was completely rigid, and his face, well, I couldn't see it clearly. His head was tilted slightly downward, so all I could make out was the shadow where his eyes should have been. Instinct kicked in, and I pressed harder on the gas, wanting to just pass him quickly and not think about it. But as soon as my car lined up with where he was standing, he stepped forward. Not into the road, but just enough that he was closer to me. And I swear I saw his head turn, following my car as I passed. My stomach dropped. My pulse was racing. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it was probably some drunk farmer, or maybe a hunter heading back from the woods. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew something wasn't right. People don't just stand completely still at the edge of the road like that. Not at midnight. Not in the freezing cold. I kept driving, trying to shake it off, but then, maybe half a mile later, my headlights caught another figure. Same posture. Same ragged clothes. Standing perfectly still at the tree line, facing the road. I slowed again, this time barely keeping my foot on the gas, my eyes glued to the figure as I got closer. When I was about even with them, I saw something that made my skin crawl. It wasn't the same person. This one was taller, broader. The clothing was different too, lighter in color, but still old, still ragged. And once again, the head followed me as I passed. At this point, every nerve in my body was screaming to just floor it and get off that road as fast as possible. My breathing was heavy. My hands were gripping the wheel so tight they hurt. But what could I do? There was no turn-off, no gas station, nowhere safe to stop, just miles of lonely road. I drove faster, the car rattling a bit as I pushed it over 70. The mist was getting thicker now, swirling in my headlights, and every second I expected another figure to appear at the edge of the woods. And then one did. But this time, it wasn't standing still. I saw the figure step right into the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes so hard my seatbelt locked across my chest. The tires squealed, and for a moment all I could hear was the screech of rubber on asphalt. The figure just stood there in my headlights, dead center in the lane. It was another man, but this one I could see more clearly. His clothes looked wrong, like they were from another time. Old boots, torn trousers, and a shirt that might have once been white but was now stained and filthy. His skin was pale, almost grey. His mouth hung slightly open, but he didn't say a word, didn't move, didn't blink. I sat frozen in the driver's seat, my car idling a few feet away from him, headlights shining directly on his body. Then, without warning, he turned his head, not slowly like the others, but in one quick, snapping motion directly toward me. And I finally saw his eyes. They were completely white. I panicked. I threw the car into reverse, tires screeching as I backed up. I didn't care if I hit the ditch or ruined my car. I just needed distance. But when I glanced in the rearview mirror, my stomach flipped. There was someone standing in the middle of the road behind me. I slammed the brakes again. For a few seconds I couldn't breathe. Both ends of the road were blocked. Both figures were just standing there, staring at me. I don't know how long I sat there, my hands trembling on the wheel, the cold sweat running down my back. But then the headlights flickered, just once. And when they came back fully, the road was empty. No one in front of me, no one behind me. I waited for a few moments, staring into the darkness, expecting them to reappear, but they didn't. Finally, with my heart hammering in my chest, I put the car back into drive and hit the gas. I don't even remember the rest of the trip home, just the overwhelming relief when I finally saw the glow of my town in the distance. Even now, years later, I avoid that road completely. I drive an extra 30 minutes just to go around it. Because what I saw out there, I still don't have an explanation for it. And I don't think I ever will. The man in the broken car. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning when this happened. I was on my way back from a friend's house after a long night of hanging out. My route took me through a stretch of country highway, one of those roads where you might not see another car for 20-30 minutes at a time. No houses, no lights, just fields, woods, and the occasional mile marker glowing faintly in my headlights. I wasn't tired exactly, but the silence of that road has a way of making you hyper-aware. Every little sound stands out. The hum of the tires, the faint rattle of the dashboard, the occasional rustle of leaves when the wind blows through the trees. That's why I noticed the car right away. Up ahead, maybe 100 yards, I saw the faint glint of a bumper catching my headlights. As I got closer, I realized there was an old sedan pulled over to the side of the road. Its hazard lights were on, blinking in that steady, slow rhythm. Flash, pause, flash. Now, normally I wouldn't think twice about seeing a broken down car, but at 2 in the morning, out there in the middle of nowhere, it immediately felt wrong. Still, I slowed down. I figured maybe someone genuinely needed help. I mean, if it were me stranded out there, I'd be praying somebody would stop. As I rolled closer, I could make out more details. The car looked rough, paint chipping, one of the windows cracked, the body rusted in spots. It didn't look like something that had been kept in good condition. Then I saw him. A man was standing just outside the car, next to the driver's side door. My headlights swept over him as I slowed almost to a stop. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. His head was bowed low, so at first all I could see was the top of his hair. I rolled down my window halfway. "Hey, you okay?" I called out. He didn't answer. Instead, he slowly lifted his head, and that's when I saw his face. Something about it made my stomach twist immediately. His skin looked wrong. Pale, but not like normal pale. More like the color had been drained out completely. His eyes were dark, too dark, like there was no reflection in them at all. And his mouth hung open just slightly, but not in a natural way. I froze, one hand still gripping the steering wheel. Then suddenly he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was too wide, too forced, like his face wasn't built to do it. And then he said in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it over my idling engine. "Car trouble." Just 2 words. Flat. Empty. Something inside me screamed to hit the gas. But instead, like an idiot, I asked, "Do you need me to call someone?" "A tow truck?" For a long moment he didn't say anything, just stared at me with that too wide smile. Then he tilted his head. Not like he was thinking, but like he was mimicking the gesture, like he'd seen people do it before and was copying. Finally, he said, "Yes, tow truck." But the way he said it didn't sound like a request. It sounded like he was repeating the words back to me. That was enough for me. I nodded quickly, rolled my window back up and muttered, "Okay, I'll call someone," even though I had zero intention of doing it. I shifted into drive, ready to pull away. But just before I pressed the gas, I glanced into my rearview mirror, and my blood turned cold. There was another man standing directly behind my car. I hadn't seen him before. He hadn't been there when I first pulled up. But now, he was just there. Standing a few feet from my bumper, motionless, his face hidden in the shadows. I whipped my head around to look out the back window, and for a second, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, he was real. He was there. My breathing grew shallow. My fingers tightened on the wheel. My instincts were screaming at me to get the hell out. So that's what I did. I slammed my foot on the gas, swerving around the broken-down sedan and back onto the highway. My tires kicked up gravel as I tore away, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I didn't look back. I couldn't. But even as I sped down that empty road, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting to see headlights coming up fast behind me. But there was nothing, just endless darkness. I drove like that for maybe 10 more minutes before I finally saw a gas station up ahead. One of those 24-hour places with buzzing fluorescent lights and a couple of trucks parked outside. I pulled in, parked under the brightest light I could find, and just sat there for a while, trying to calm down. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to grip the wheel to steady them. Eventually I went inside, bought a coffee I didn't really want, and told the guy behind the counter what had happened. He just stared at me for a moment, then shook his head slowly. "Man, you shouldn't stop for anyone on that road," he said. "There's been stories for years. People flagging drivers down, asking for help, then disappearing. Or worse, he didn't elaborate on what worse meant, and I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. To this day, I don't know if what I saw was real, if those men were alive, if they were even human. But I'll never forget the way that first one smiled at me, like his face didn't quite know how to do it. And I'll never stop wondering what would have happened if I had gotten out of my car. The Vanishing Hitchhiker. I've told this story only a handful of times, mostly because people either laugh at me or give me that look. The one that says you've been awake too long and your brain played tricks on you. But I know what I saw, and no matter how much I try to rationalize it, I'll never forget it. This happened about 5 years ago. I was a college student then, driving home for the holidays. My hometown is about 4 hours away, and the quickest route takes you through a long stretch of rural highway, nothing but woods on both sides, an occasional field, and every once in a while an old farmhouse set back from the road. I left late in the evening, hoping to avoid traffic. By the time I hit the highway, it was past midnight. The road was quiet. My headlights were the only lights in sight, cutting through the darkness. I'd been driving maybe an hour when I saw her. Up ahead, just at the edge of my headlights, there was a figure walking along the side of the road. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but as I got closer, it was clear. It was a young woman. She wore a light dress, white or pale grey, that looked totally out of place in the cold night. Her hair was long and dark, hanging loose around her shoulders. She wasn't holding a bag, didn't have a phone in her hand, nothing. Just walking slowly, barefoot, her arms wrapped loosely around herself. I slowed down, debating what to do. Every instinct told me it was strange, but I couldn't just leave her out there. What if she'd been in an accident? Or escaped something worse? So I pulled over and rolled down the passenger side window. "Hey, are you okay? Do you need a ride?" She stopped walking and turned to look at me. Her face was pale, almost unnaturally pale in my headlights. But she didn't look afraid. In fact, her expression was calm, almost too calm. "Yes," she said softly. "Thank you." She climbed into the passenger seat without hesitation, as if she'd been expecting me. Up close, she looked about my age, maybe 21 or 22. Her dress was simple, old-fashioned almost, and her skin was cold. I noticed that immediately when her hand brushed the seatbelt. We drove in silence for a few minutes. I tried to make small talk. "So, where are you headed?" "Home," she said. Her voice was quiet, flat, like she was half asleep. "Okay, where's home?" She looked straight ahead, her eyes fixed on the dark road. "Just a little farther." Something about the way she said it made me uneasy, but I kept driving. Every few seconds I glanced at her. She didn't move much, didn't fidget, didn't shift in her seat like most people do. She just sat there, hands folded neatly in her lap, staring forward. After about 10 minutes, she spoke again. "You can let me off at the next curve," she said. I frowned. "Are you sure? There's nothing out here, no houses, no lights." She finally turned her head to look at me. Her eyes caught mine for just a moment, and I swear they looked darker than they should have, like the pupils swallowed the whole iris. "Yes," she said, "here is fine." Against my better judgment, I slowed as we approached a bend in the road. The woods pressed close on either side, and the curve dipped just enough that my headlights couldn't see far ahead. I pulled onto the shoulder and stopped. She unbuckled her seatbelt, gave me a faint smile, the only expression she'd shown the entire time, and said, "Thank you for the ride." Then she opened the door and stepped out. I leaned across the seat to watch her, confused. But the moment she closed the door and I blinked, she was gone. Not walking away, not standing by the trees. Gone. The road was empty. My stomach dropped. I scrambled out of the car, looking around, calling out. The woods were silent. No crunch of footsteps, no rustling branches, no sign of her at all. It was impossible. She had been right there. My chest tightened as I realized how cold the air felt, colder than before. A chill spread through me, and I got back into the car as fast as I could, locking the doors out of pure instinct. I drove the rest of the way home without stopping. The whole time, I couldn't shake the image of her sitting silently in the passenger seat, hands folded, eyes fixed on the road. When I finally got home, I told my parents what had happened. My mum went pale. My dad just looked at me, dead serious, and said, "Which road?" I told him, and he nodded slowly. "There's been stories about that stretch for years," he said. "A girl who died in a car crash there decades ago. People say she tries to hitch rides back home, but she never makes it." I wanted to argue, to tell him that wasn't possible, but the memory of her cold skin, her strange calmness, and the way she vanished without a sound, I couldn't deny it. Sometimes, when I drive at night, I glance at the passenger seat, half expecting to see her sitting there again, waiting for me to take her home. The Last Stop. Part 1. Boarding the train and the first shadow. Clara had always found comfort in the stillness of the city at night. While most people hurried home or gathered in bright, bustling cafes, she wandered the empty streets, her thoughts tangled in quiet reflection. The subway, with its rhythmic hum and the distant echo of trains clattering along rails, felt like a sanctuary. It was a place where time seemed suspended, where the world's chaos didn't exist, or at least it seemed that way. Tonight, the city was silent. Even the usual hum of traffic had diminished to a distant sigh. Clara's footsteps echoed sharply against the cold, concrete sidewalks as she approached her usual station. The fluorescent lights above flickered intermittently, casting sharp, shifting shadows on the platform. The faint scent of ozone from the rails mingled with the lingering dampness from the recent rain, producing a chill that crawled under her skin. She checked her watch, 12:17 a.m. The last train would be here in just a few minutes. Usually, there were a handful of night owls, a tired worker or two, maybe a couple arguing quietly on the far side of the platform. But tonight, there was nothing. No people, no voices, just the constant low hum of electricity running through the rails. Clara shivered. As she waited, she felt a strange tightening in her chest, an unease she couldn't quite place. The station had never felt this empty. The light overhead buzzed louder, a sound that seemed almost deliberate, as if it were trying to get her attention. Clara shook her head. "I'm just tired," she told herself. "Too much coffee and not enough sleep." The train arrived with a screech that made her jump, the wheels grinding along the tracks in a sound that seemed harsher than normal, almost angry. Its doors slid open with a hiss that echoed down the empty car. Clara hesitated for just a moment, noticing the strange absence of passengers. Normally, even at this hour, there would be a few scattered figures, students returning from late classes, cleaners, someone just heading home from work. But the car was completely empty. Clara stepped inside, dragging her bag behind her. The doors closed behind her with a metallic slam, echoing unnaturally in the stillness. The train lurched forward smoothly, almost silently, and she looked around. Every seat was vacant. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered erratically, bathing the car in a sickly, inconsistent glow. The hum of the train was different too. It wasn't the usual low, steady vibration beneath her feet. This hum felt heavier, oppressive, like the air itself was pressing down on her. She sat down, placing her bag beside her, and tried to calm herself. "It's just a quiet night," she murmured. "The last train, that's all." The walls of the train car were lined with the usual advertisements and maps. Clara leaned closer to the route map, trying to find reassurance in the familiar lines and station names. But the map was wrong. The stations were unfamiliar. Names she didn't recognize: Venice, Dahlia Cross, Silent Reach. The lines twisted and curved in ways that made no sense. Even the colors of the lines were off, smeared in places as if painted hastily. A soft whisper drifted past her ear, so faint she could have imagined it. She froze, holding her breath, listening. But the car was empty. She laughed nervously at herself. It's the wind, or maybe my own imagination. Then she heard it again. A whisper, clearer this time, barely audible. "Clara." Her heart skipped a beat. She spun around, but no one was there. The air felt heavier, warmer, yet somehow chilling, as if it had been artificially thickened. Her skin prickled, and she realized she was gripping the edge of her seat so hard her knuckles were white. The train slowed as it approached the next station. Clara peered out the window, expecting the familiar sight of concrete platforms and fluorescent lights. Instead, there was darkness. An empty expanse stretching endlessly, void-like. She could barely see the faint outline of a platform covered in a thin layer of mist. The station name was visible above the doors: Silent Reach. Something was wrong. The station shouldn't look like this. Stations weren't supposed to be empty at night. Not like this. Clara's instinct screamed at her to leave the train, to run, but her curiosity and a lingering sense of disbelief kept her rooted to her seat. The whisper came again, closer this time, echoing in her mind. "Clara, come." A shadow flickered along the wall across from her. At first, she thought it was her reflection, distorted by the flickering lights. But the shadow moved independently, jerking unnaturally as it twisted into a humanoid shape. Its face was featureless except for two dark, hollow pits where eyes should have been. It raised a long, thin arm as though beckoning her. Clara's pulse raced. She scrambled to her feet, her bag clattering to the floor. "Who's there?" she shouted, her voice cracking. The shadow didn't respond. It shifted closer, gliding along the wall, moving without the usual sound of footsteps. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she didn't know where she could go. The train was moving, and she was trapped inside it. The shadow paused directly across from her, its blank face tilting unnaturally. The whisper became louder, almost intelligible now, as if the air itself were forming words around her. "You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be here." Panic surged through her. She ran to the doors, pounding on them, screaming. Nothing. The doors didn't budge. The train car seemed to respond to her fear, the lights flickering more violently, the hum deepening into a low, resonant growl. The shadow remained, just inches away, faceless eyes boring into hers. Clara backed away, bumping into a seat. The shadow followed, always maintaining that impossible distance, never touching the floor, never stopping. She stumbled over her bag and fell to the ground, gasping for air. And then she saw the mirror-like panel at the end of the car. Her reflection, her real reflection, wasn't there. Instead, she saw the shadow mimicking her movements perfectly, down to the smallest twitch of her fingers, but its face remained hollow, its grin growing impossibly wide. She scrambled to her feet, clutching her bag, and ran to the other end of the car. The train groaned as if protesting, and she could feel vibrations under her feet, like the train itself was alive. The shadow followed. The whisper had become a chorus now, layered and overlapping, chanting her name, calling her to step into the darkness. Clara's mind raced, trying to think. Was this real? Was she hallucinating? She had read about sleep deprivation, stress-induced psychosis, and yet the shadows were real. They were real. The train jolted sharply, throwing her against the wall. The lights went out for a heartbeat, and in that darkness, Clara swore she could feel the shadow brush against her. A cold, creeping sensation, like ice crawling across her skin. When the lights flickered back, the car was empty again. She was alone, at least for a moment. But the whisper lingered in her mind, a low hum vibrating through her skull. You shouldn't be here. You should never have come. The train slowed, approaching the next station. Clara pressed her face to the window, hoping to see something familiar. Instead, the station was even stranger than the last. The platform warped and elongated, shadows stretching impossibly long, as if reality itself were bending. Clara sank to the floor, shaking, trying to make sense of what was happening. And then she noticed the names. Written on the platform, carved into the concrete, were hundreds of names. Some were familiar, some weren't. Some were her own. Her blood ran cold. Clara's hands were trembling as she pressed her palms to the cold floor of the subway car. She couldn't stop staring at the platform outside, at the jagged names etched into the concrete. Some were worn with age, some fresh, carved deep and dark into the stone. And then horror gripped her. There were her initials, faintly scratched beside a date she didn't recognize. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Her voice felt stolen by the oppressive hum of the train and the whispering chorus that now surrounded her, resonating from every corner of the car. It was everywhere, inside her skull, reverberating with her heartbeat. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be here. With shaking hands, Clara tried the doors again. They wouldn't budge. The train had become a cage, a metallic coffin hurtling through darkness. She moved to the far end of the car, glancing at the reflection panels again. The shadow was gone, or at least it wasn't standing still. Something moved behind the mirrored surface, faster than she could track, jerking and twitching. Panic rising, she forced herself to focus. If the doors wouldn't open, maybe she could stop the train, pull the emergency brake. Clara sprinted down the aisle, her bag bouncing wildly behind her, slamming into seats. She reached the end car, a small metallic lever gleaming in the flickering light. With every ounce of strength, she yanked it down. The train groaned violently, lights flickering out, the hum turning into a deafening roar. She could feel the rails shaking beneath her, vibrations like an earthquake. The whispers grew louder, almost screaming now, overlapping words in languages she couldn't recognize, ancient and sinister. Suddenly the train jerked to a stop. Clara flew forward, hitting the wall hard, scraping her hands against the metal. She sat there, chest heaving, staring at the windows. Outside, the station was gone. The platform had vanished entirely, replaced by an endless black void. She couldn't see anything, not rails, not walls, not even faint light, only darkness stretched out, infinite and suffocating. And then she heard it. The footsteps. They were slow at first, deliberate, echoing somewhere deep within the train, impossible to locate. Clara froze. The sound didn't match her heartbeat, didn't match the train. It came from everywhere and nowhere, advancing toward her steadily. Her eyes darted to the other seats, empty. The reflection panels, nothing. She wanted to run, but the train was stopped in the void, leaving no direction to escape. And then she saw them, faint silhouettes appearing at the far end of the car. Shadowy figures, their forms human but distorted, swaying as if struggling to hold themselves together. Their faces were blank, smooth, pale, with nothing in place of eyes or mouths. They didn't walk normally. They glided, jerked, lurched. One turned its head toward her. Clara screamed, throwing her bag at it. The shadow recoiled, then jerked forward again, closer this time, moving faster than should have been possible. Panic clawed at her throat. She scrambled backward, colliding with seats, sliding across the metallic floor, but the shadow pursued without effort. Her mind raced. What is this place? Why am I here? The whispers changed tone. They weren't just saying her name anymore. They were laughing, soft and cruel, like children taunting her from the dark. Then the voices layered on top of each other, forming a terrible cacophony. Clara, you belong. Come, we are waiting. It is your turn. The train jerked forward again without warning, plunging into darkness. Clara could feel the acceleration, the twisting of the rails, but there was no sense of direction, no landmarks. It was as if the train had left reality entirely. The shadows multiplied, now pressing against the windows, appearing in every reflection, gliding along the walls. Some of them reached toward her, thin, faceless arms outstretched, their hands stretching impossibly long, fingers like skeletal tendrils. Clara screamed again, turning to run toward the front of the car. She reached for the emergency brake, hoping to stop the train, but it was gone, replaced by another reflection panel that now showed her own image, or rather, a version of her that wasn't quite right. Her reflection's eyes were black pits, her smile twisted into a grin that stretched far too wide. The reflection moved independently, leaning toward her as if to mock her terror. Her hands flew to her face, trembling. When she looked again, the reflection mimicked her panic, but with subtle differences, subtle movements she hadn't made, tilting its head, raising a hand she hadn't moved. The whispers grew louder. Join us, join us. It is warmer. Clara stumbled back, tripping over a seat. She crawled along the floor, trying to put distance between herself and the reflection, but every turn of the car revealed the same thing: shadows, silhouettes, distorted versions of herself, all watching, all moving closer. Desperate, she clambered to her feet and ran toward the far end of the car. That's when she noticed the train itself seemed different. The walls were warped, bending slightly in impossible angles, the fluorescent lights flickering in patterns that hurt her eyes. The hum had become a pulse, synchronized with her heartbeat, or perhaps something else, something inhuman. She reached a corner of the car where a small panel was labeled Maintenance Access. Desperation gave her courage. She pulled at the handle, but it was stuck. A whisper hissed into her ear. "Do not resist." Clara forced the panel open. Darkness spilled out beyond the small hatch, a faint smell of rust and damp, but the darkness seemed alive. Tendrils of black mist curled from the hole, reaching for her. She recoiled, but instinct propelled her forward into the tunnel beyond the hatch. The moment she crossed, the train lurched violently, lights exploding in brief flashes that revealed hundreds of faces pressed against the windows, hollow-eyed, faceless, grinning. And in that instant, Clara understood. The train wasn't just a vehicle. It was a trap, a collection. Each passenger, each lost soul, became part of its endless ride through the void. Clara ran, heart hammering, into the darkness beyond the hatch. The whispers followed, omnipresent, taunting, relentless. "You shouldn't be here. It is your turn. Join us." Ahead, faint shapes emerged. Other passengers? Or were they more shadows, victims trapped like her? Their faces were pale, twisted with fear or despair, eyes hollow and dark. Some reached out to her. Others vanished the moment she looked directly at them. She tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the darkness stretched infinitely, the path ahead impossible to judge. Every step forward brought new horrors, apparitions leaping from nowhere, hands brushing against her skin with icy, unnatural cold, whispers scratching at her mind. And then, a sudden stillness. The whispers stopped. The shadows froze mid-motion. The darkness held its breath. Clara stumbled forward, eyes wide, listening. In the stillness, a single voice broke the silence. "Welcome, Clara. We've been waiting." It was soft, almost comforting, but beneath it was a menace that made her knees buckle. She wanted to run, but the darkness behind her shifted, stretching tendrils that pressed against her back, forcing her forward. Ahead, she saw the next station, or what resembled a station. It was a grotesque parody of one she might recognize. Platforms warped into jagged angles, lights flickering in colors that didn't exist, shadows pooling in corners like liquid. And carved across the walls, hundreds more names, her own, again and again, as if warning her that escape was impossible. The whispering chorus resumed, louder now, overlapping the single voice. "Clara, it is time. You belong to the last stop." Clara sank to her knees, her mind screaming in terror. She realized the truth, horrifying and undeniable. This was no ordinary subway ride. She hadn't just stumbled onto a late-night train. She had entered a trap, a liminal space between worlds, where the lost, the late, the unaware were collected. And now, the train had marked her. As she looked up, shadows shifted in the flickering light. Figures pressed against the warped platform walls, stretching impossibly long, some leaning through the windows, others appearing inside the car. All faceless, all waiting, all hungry for her fear. Clara had no idea how far she had come, how many stations she had passed, or if time even mattered here. The train moved, yes, but it also seemed to move through her mind, through the very fabric of reality. Every second stretched into eternity. Every heartbeat echoed with the voices, "You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be here." The man's eyes shifted to her. For a moment, hope sparked. He had acknowledged her. But then his lips parted, and a whisper hissed from his throat, the same words she had heard since boarding. "You shouldn't be here." Clara stumbled back, heart pounding. She looked around the car. One by one, the other passengers turned their heads toward her, their movements mechanical, synchronized. Their voices overlapped, a chorus of whispers filling the car. "You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be here." Clara clamped her hands over her ears, screaming, "Stop it! Stop it!" The voices grew louder, pressing into her skull until she thought her head would split. Then, just as suddenly as it began, silence fell. Clara lowered her hands slowly, gasping for breath. The passengers had turned away again, their faces blank, their gazes fixed forward. Her chest heaved. She didn't know how much more of this she could take. The journal? As the train rattled on, Clara noticed something strange. On the seat across from her lay a small, leather-bound journal. It hadn't been there before. She hesitated, then reached for it. The cover was worn, the edges frayed. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were frantic scrawls, page after page of shaky handwriting. "The train doesn't stop." "Not really. The stations are lies. The doors open, but they don't lead anywhere safe." "I tried." God, I tried, Clara's breath caught. She flipped further. "The passengers aren't alive. They're echoes, copies of what used to be. The train feeds on them, on us." On fear. Her stomach twisted. She flipped to the last page. "If you see your name on the walls, it's already too late." The journal slipped from her hands, landing on the floor with a dull thud. Clara pressed her fist to her mouth, trying to hold back a sob. She had seen her name. Over and over. The train slowed again, screeching into another station. Clara's eyes darted to the windows. This platform was worse than the last. The walls were cracked and bleeding darkness, as if shadows themselves were seeping through the concrete. And written in enormous letters across the far wall was a single word: Clara. Her blood ran cold. The doors hissed open. The mist outside shifted. Shadows stretched across the platform, long and thin, moving closer. And this time, they were smiling. The passenger beside her. Clara gripped the edge of her seat, shaking. She couldn't get off. She wouldn't get off. But staying in the car felt impossible too. The oppressive silence, the blank stares of the other passengers, it was unbearable. And then, without warning, the woman sitting beside her turned her head. Clara hadn't even realized someone was next to her. The woman's face was pale, her eyes bloodshot, lips trembling. Unlike the others, there was still humanity in her expression. "You're alive," the woman whispered hoarsely. Clara blinked, stunned. You can talk?" The woman nodded weakly. "Not many of us left." "Most fade, they become like the others." "Empty." Clara leaned closer, desperate. "What is this place? What is happening?" The woman's eyes darted nervously toward the reflection panels, then back to Clara. "It's the last stop. Everyone who boards belongs to it now. The train doesn't let go." Clara shook her head violently. "No, there has to be a way out." The woman's expression darkened. "Maybe, but not without a cost, and not everyone who tries survives." The train shuddered violently, lights flickering overhead. The passengers lifted their heads in unison, their gazes snapping toward Clara and the woman. The whispers began again, louder this time, harsher. "You shouldn't be here! You shouldn't be here! You shouldn't be here!" Clara clutched the woman's hand, her nails digging into her skin. "Then how do I leave?" she begged. "Please, tell me." The woman leaned closer, her voice so soft Clara could barely hear it over the chorus of whispers. "You have to find the conductor." Clara clutched the woman's trembling hand, the echo of the whispers still crawling inside her skull. The passengers sat frozen once more, blank and lifeless, as if the chorus had stolen what little humanity was left in them. Only the woman seemed alive, though her skin was ashen and her breath shallow. "The conductor," Clara whispered, her throat dry. "Who is he?" The woman's eyes darted to the reflection panels above them. For a moment, Clara thought she saw a shadow move there, tall, hunched, stretching across the length of the car. "He's the one who drives this place," the woman said, her voice almost too faint to hear. "The one who keeps it moving. The one who decides when you fade and when you stay." Clara's stomach twisted. "Then I need to find him. If I can talk to him, maybe he'll let me off." The woman gave a hollow laugh, short and broken. "Nobody bargains with a conductor. He doesn't deal in mercy, only in fares, the corridor of carriages." The train jolted, harder this time, as if urging Clara forward. She stood, pulling free from the woman's hand. Her legs trembled, but held. "I can't just sit here," she said. "If there's a chance, any chance, I have to try." The woman didn't argue. She only lowered her gaze, whispering, "Then may whatever pieces of you remain, find peace." Clara swallowed her fear and pushed down the aisle. The next set of doors loomed ahead. She braced herself and stepped through. This carriage was worse, much worse. Every seat was filled. Passengers sat perfectly still, heads bowed, hands folded. Their skin was grey, waxy, their features melting into one another. Some twitched faintly like puppets on invisible strings. The air was thick with the smell of damp rot, as if the train itself was decaying. Clara moved slowly down the aisle, trying not to meet their empty gazes. Her heart hammered. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but the thought of fading into nothingness was worse. Halfway through the car, one of the passengers lifted his head. His eyes locked on hers, dark, bottomless pits. His lips curled into a smile that stretched too far, splitting the skin at the corners. "You're late," he whispered. Clara froze. The man's head snapped violently to the side, like something yanking it on a string, and then he went still again. Clara forced herself to keep walking. At the end of the carriage, the door opened before she could touch it. A gust of icy wind hit her, carrying with it the faint sound of something. A bell? Number? A whistle? Long and low, like the cry of a train in the dead of night. Her stomach churned. She stepped through. The engine car. The new carriage was different, narrower, lined with metal pipes that hissed and steamed. The walls dripped with condensation, and the floor thrummed with the heavy heartbeat of machinery. The noise was deafening, a constant grinding, a rhythm that pressed against her chest. And at the far end, silhouetted in the dim glow of a flickering lamp, stood a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, a long black coat hung heavy on his frame, and a cap was pulled low over his brow. His back was to her, but she knew. She knew before he turned. The conductor. Her breath caught. Slowly, impossibly slowly, he rotated to face her. His face was hidden in shadow, but she could see enough. The sharp angles, the pale skin stretched too tight, and eyes that glowed faintly with an inhuman blackness. "You've come far," the conductor said. His voice was deep, resonant, vibrating through the metal of the car itself. "Further than most." Clara's hands curled into fists to stop their shaking. "I want to get off. I don't belong here." The conductor tilted his head. For a moment there was silence but for the grinding of the engine. Then slowly he raised a hand and pointed a long gloved finger at her. "You boarded," he said. "That is enough. Once aboard, the fare must be paid." "I didn't know," Clara shouted. "I thought it was just a train. I just wanted to go home." A rumble of laughter echoed from him, though his lips never moved. And what is home but another stop on the line? You stepped, willingly. The rest does not matter, Clara shook her head violently. No, I won't fade. I won't end up like them. The conductor studied her for a long moment. Then he gestured to the walls of the car. Clara's breath hitched. Her name was there, not once, not a dozen times, hundreds, scratched into the metal, scrawled in ash, carved deep into the very steel. Her knees buckled. You are already written, the conductor said. The train knows you. It carries you. There is only one way to leave the choice. Clara forced herself upright, her chest heaving. Tell me, she whispered. The conductor stepped closer. His shadow stretched across the floor, swallowing her shoes, creeping up her legs. Take my place, he said. Her blood ran cold. What? He loomed above her now, his face inches from hers, though the shadows still concealed it. The train requires a guide, a keeper, a conductor. Take the cap, take the coat, and it will be yours. You may drive it, control it, endure it, or refuse and fade. Clara stumbled back, shaking her head. No, no, I can't. His hand shot out, impossibly fast, seizing her wrist. His touch was ice, burning straight to her bones. You already wear the fear, he growled. That is the only uniform required. Clara's heart pounded. Her mind screamed. To take his place would mean becoming this thing, trapping others as he had trapped her. But to refuse meant joining the faces on the wall. Nothingness. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She thought of her apartment, her friends, her life above ground, the laughter, the warmth, everything she wanted to return to. And then she thought of the passengers, hollowed-out echoes, trapped in endless silence. Her voice broke. I can't. The conductor's eyes flared darker than night. His grip tightened, and for an instant she saw herself reflected in them, not as she was, but as she would become, blank, lifeless, a face on the wall. No, she whispered fiercely. She pulled back with all her strength, tearing free of his icy grip. I'd rather fade than become you. The end of the line. The conductor didn't move. He simply tilted his head, almost curious, almost amused. Then he stepped aside. Behind him, the wall of the engine car shimmered. It wasn't metal anymore. It was nothing. A vast void, blacker than any night, pulling at her like gravity. The end of the line, he said. If you will not conduct, then you will depart. Clara's chest heaved. Her every nerve screamed not to step closer, but her legs moved anyway. She stood at the edge, staring into the abyss. The pull was immense, but not violent, almost welcoming. She looked back one last time. The conductor stood perfectly still, the cap hiding his face, his eyes burning faintly in the dark. And for a moment, just a moment, she thought she saw sorrow there. Then she stepped forward. The void swallowed her whole. Epilogue. When Clara opened her eyes, she was standing on a subway platform. Clean, brightly lit. The digital clock on the wall read 1:06 a.m. Her heart hammered. She was back. She turned in a frantic circle. Normal posters lined the walls. Normal fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. But as her eyes scanned the tiles, she froze. There it was, scratched faintly into the wall as if by a desperate hand. Her name, Clara. The sound of a train echoed from the tunnel. The lights of an approaching subway flared. The brakes screeched. The doors opened with a cheerful chime. And in the window's reflection, just for a second, she thought she saw a cap pulled low, and eyes as black as coal. The next time you step onto a late-night train, look twice at the conductor, look twice at the names scratched into the walls, and if you hear your own whispered back to you over and over, don't stay seated, don't wait for the last stop, because once you board, the fare will always be collected. No matter how far you try to run, the train has stopped. but for some, the ride never ends. Would you dare step aboard? Comment below what you would do.